Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of the Numbers Podcast. Philippe, it's been a really snowy week here for us.
It's been falling down. It's also been raining polls this past week because I think that it's the dump before Christmas, the dump of polling. I didn't think it would come so early, Eric, but we have tons to talk about federally and also provincially. So where do you want to start this week?
Yeah, we should probably get into it. As you said, it's a bit of a blizzard of polling. I do wonder, yeah, as you said, it is early, so I wonder if this is going to be kind of it. But just over the last few days, we had a new poll from Nanos Research, as we always do. We had a poll that came out from Leger. We had one from Abacus that was mentioned in the Toronto Star, and Dave Cletto said that the full details will be coming out on the weekend, but we do have the top lines. And then this morning, Thursday morning, we got a poll from the Angus Reid Institute. There's a lot of similarities between these polls.
Oh, yeah.
And these similarities should be, one, good for the Conservatives, make them happy. Bad for the Liberals. Not too bad for the NDP. Pretty good for the NDP. So I'll just go through the numbers quickly. Nanos had 42 Conservative, 23 Liberal, 21 NDP. Remember those numbers. Leger, 43 Conservative, 21 Liberal, 19 NDP. Abacus, 44 Conservative, 21 Liberal, 20 NDP. And the Angus Reid Institute, 43 Conservative, 20 Liberal, 20 NDP.
Yep.
That's a lot of consensus. Leger had been the polling firm that was out of step a little bit, having the NDP down near 15%. But this is three pollsters, plus Nanos, if we include them. Yep. Yeah, we can say all three of them, all four of them, have the NDP and the Liberals within 2 points of each other. Are we now starting to get into consensus territory here?
Well, I think we are. I mean, not that there was much disagreement. I mean, it was still small. But if you look at the Leger poll in early November, they had the Liberals at 26, which was on a high end, and the NDP at 15. But now, oh my God, 21%. I just looked the list of Leger polls. 21% is the lowest for the Liberals since at least 2015 from Leger, right? And we're not talking about 23 and 24% for the Liberals. Right now, we're talking about 20 or 21, which somehow the numbers got even worse for the Liberals this fall. Now, we should state that the GST break, whatever you think of it, it's not included in there. It's too fast, right? It's the next round of polling. I think we'll see if there was any movement. But how many times, Eric, have we said that over the past year and a half? Oh, we have to wait until this has any change. And it seems that many Canadian voters really have tuned out the Liberals. Whatever they do, it doesn't get any better, and it keeps getting, like, frankly, worse right now. Because we're not at 25 range anymore. We're in the 20 and 21 range. What did you make of those numbers?
We'd have to check some of the dates, but I know that Leger did ask about the GST thing. So I do think it is taking into account at least the initial reaction.
Yeah.
I think, though, what's significant about this one is that the initial reaction, I think, is probably pretty important. This seems to have been something that a lot of people heard about. You know, it isn't a housing accelerator or, some sort of obscure policy that won't impact people right away. It does seem to me that a lot of people have heard about this and had an initial reaction, and it doesn't seem like it's been a good one. As you said, it might take a little bit longer for people to really digest it. I don't know, but the Leger poll, some of the questions they asked do suggest that people weren't all that impressed by it. Whether or not it's going to hurt, or it doesn't seem to have helped, and I think that is the key here, because this is clearly, it was a bit of a punt by the Liberals to try to do something to try to get their numbers moving. And it doesn't seem like it's worked initially. And with the fact that we're now seeing the NDP across the board on these polls at 19 to 21, it's starting to feel, and we'd have to look at maybe some of the crosstabs to figure it out, but it's starting to look like now that the Conservatives have filled up, and maybe they've taken a few extra points, now they're at 43, 42, but they filled up on that Liberal vote. Maybe the Liberals are starting to lose a couple of points to the NDP, couple of points maybe to the Bloc. Their numbers are quite good in Quebec. It's starting to get into, I mean, it was already disaster zone, but now it's starting to get into catastrophe zone. Do the Liberals even finish second in the seats with these kinds of numbers?
Oh, no. I mean, right now the trend line is downwards, and as many of you know on social media, I added a new chart in the fall, right? This new chart that odds of official opposition. I have the data. It's just I never published them because it was always 100% for Liberals. It's not anymore. The last week's update, a quarter of all simulations had the Bloc finishing higher than the Liberals in the seat count. Even though the Bloc, I mean, let's say it again. The Bloc is doing well, but it's not. We're not crushing numbers here. It's not Gilles Duceppe winning 50 seats. It's 40, 44, 42, 46. You said we went from a disaster to a catastrophe. I kind of agree with that, but my epithet it was different. Right now, I'm looking at these numbers, and it went from bad to sad. At some point, it's really sad. Not if you're a conservative, obviously, but sad not in the sadness, but just it's pathetic. Like, where else would a party leader still be on with these numbers? Like, it's insane. Even if you're going to elect a new leader who will be sacrificed in the next election because the Liberals are heading for defeat, at some point we're getting into very, very sad territory here for me. So yeah, I will have to adjust my numbers on Sunday, as I always do. But yeah, 4 polls in a row that have the NDP between 19 and 21. We had not seen that for a while now. I look at the list, it's been a while. So the NDP will trend up. I'm not sure in the seat count it will go up that much because they're still getting beaten in BC. Maybe a couple of games in Ontario with these numbers, with poor performances from the Liberals. But yeah, that's my take. We're getting into very sad territory here. It's not good outlook. It's really a lame duck prime minister right now with these numbers.
With the NDP, I find we might be getting out of the territory, at least for now, that the NDP is doomed to lose a lot of seats, because it does seem with the Liberals being so low that the NDP is inevitably going to pick up some of those seats, right? Yeah. I don't think the Conservatives are going to win in downtown Toronto or are going to win, seats in necessarily, well, they actually might, but in, Halifax or St. John's. I think those kinds of seats are much more likely to go to the NDP, maybe some of the seats on the island of Montreal. So you could imagine that the NDP loses a lot of those seats in BC, Northern Ontario, maybe Southwestern Ontario, but they compensate for them with some seats in Toronto and Montreal. And so their seat count doesn't look as bad, although the NDP caucus starts to look pretty uniform in terms of it being downtown urban area ridings. And just for the lame duckness, the sadness, I guess, for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, you don't still get the impression that he's got it secretly planned that he's going to resign over Christmas. Like the fact that he went down to go visit Donald Trump before Donald Trump is sworn in as the president does not strike me as the move of someone who is in the back of his mind stepping out of the door in 4 weeks. The same goes with the GST cut and the checks that are supposed to come out in the spring. Those are not the moves of someone who is setting up the table for a replacement to start over. So doesn't seem to matter very much what the numbers are going to be, though I would expect that the Liberals, and Justin Trudeau probably was expecting, that with these kinds of moves that they've made over the last couple of weeks, with the uncertainty from the Trump administration, that maybe the Liberals could get up over 25, and that could keep him in office. But if he ends up staying around 20, if we start to see more polls that actually have the Liberals and the NDP tied, or even the NDP ahead of the Liberals, I don't know. I'm not sure if he can actually stay on if he starts to be putting up 19s and 18s and 17s in the polls consistently.
But here's the thing. This is you're using your logic here. You're using rational thinking. And you are entirely correct. But we are into another dimension here, because it hasn't made sense for a while. Now it's more than ever clearly obvious that it's over. So will they suddenly see the light? I'm baffled by this, but I've been baffled for many months now. So by these numbers, and the Conservatives, well, I was asked, I did many interviews this week. It was a busy media week. And I've been asked, do you think that Pierre Poilievre should act more prime ministerial? His comments about the Trudeau's visit to Mar-a-Lago. And the thing is, generally the answer is yes. Like, at some point you have to do more than criticize. You have to, propose solution. But he's the leader of the opposition. He doesn't have to show his cards right away. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, criticize him all you want. Maybe your impression sometimes is that he's doing good move, or sometimes it's bad move strategically. But whatever he's doing, it's working. Mm-hmm. And sometimes maybe you don't even have to be that good when your opponent is that weak. So that's what I answered to the host. I said, well, I can analyze all I want. I can editorialize. I can put my opinion out there. I just look at the data as well. Whatever he's doing, it's working. Because, okay, so Liberals at 20 or 21. Conservatives at 43 or 44. Eric, how many seats is that? Like, we're blown past. It was a 215, 210, 220 range. Yeah. We're talking, what, 240 right now? Maybe more.
It's got to go up even more because, wow. Yeah, as you said, I think my projection right now is 218, and the gap is, I think, 18 or 19 points. We're now looking at a gap of 22, 21 points.
On average.
And it's pretty stark in Ontario, which is where it matters. Yeah, and it's in the average. So, yeah, I think we're getting up into the 230s, the 240s, because while the NDP is doing better, I don't think it actually saves them any seats from the Conservatives, right? It's more about dropping the Liberal number further down and the NDP going up as a result. So, yeah, it does kind of look like the Conservatives could be on track for by far the biggest caucus that we've seen in the history of Canada. In terms of the share of the House, I think they need to get up to, I think we calculated it in a past episode, I think they need to be up to like 260 or something. That just doesn't seem plausible based on the fact that the NDP and the Bloc and the Liberals are going to win some seats. Yeah. But this is looking like a big one. Can it be sustained for another 6 weeks, 6 months, 8 months, nearly a year? That I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you continue to have both the Liberals and the NDP at around 20%, or is one of them going to break through at some point and put the other one behind?
It's funny. If let's say the Conservatives do win, let's put a nice number to it, 252, right? 252 seats. That's 80 seats above the threshold for majority. So you could have very angry Conservatives that didn't get into cabinet, split off, and be the official opposition. And the Conservatives would still be in majority territory, right? We're in that range now that Pierre Poilievre will have to handle a very large caucus. And it's going to bring its own problems, but right now they're not thinking about this. They're looking at these numbers and they're laughing all the way because the Liberals are just handing them so much munition for attacks. And that GST break, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's the numbers, as you said, Léger asked it. I still think it's too early because we haven't seen it. I think it's December 14th, I believe, the GST break. I mean, which is very funny because you think your Christmas shopping will be done by then. I mean, many people
for the last minute.
Yeah, exactly.
For the people who put it right up to the end. Yeah, get your Christmas tree a week before Christmas. But also it's going to run all the way to Valentine's Day. So
yeah, it's going to run all the way to late winter, just before the elections. So people will see GST back as they go vote. I don't understand this strategy. Why would you do that? The tax is going to go back up just before people go to vote. Anyway, so blows my mind. But
it's not really clear to me that it is going to help. And the early initial numbers suggest it hasn't helped, and it might have actually hurt. So.
Yeah. So.
Well done. On
that note.
Yeah. Why don't we move to Ontario? That is another province that we're expecting to have an election pretty soon.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what's going to. We've seen like Doug Ford be a lot more present recently because he's talking about the tariff threat from the United States. I saw that he went on Fox News.
Fox News, yeah.
I don't often see him actually do interviews here in Canada, so to go on Fox News to do a live interview like that is interesting. So we had a new poll from Main Street Research. Numbers look a lot like the kind of numbers we've been seeing in polls for a long time out of Ontario. 42 for the PCs, 27 for the Ontario Liberals, 22 for the New Democrats. Bonnie Crombie had a profile, I guess, in the Toronto Star this past week. It did not seem to have a lot of good quotes, including the notion that it is a lot harder than maybe had been expected, or that the Ontario Liberal leader was handed
a bad hand,
a poison chalice, I guess you could say, the way that they say that. It does not seem to be going very well, and for Doug Ford, it looks like that early 2025 election can't come soon enough.
It seems that, and we can be surprised because we know that sometimes in campaigns, things can turn on a dime. But I look at these numbers for the past year in Ontario. It feels like Doug Ford could call the election not even campaign, just do a photo up here and there and win handily. Because, so that poll from Main Street Research, you said PCs at 42. That's higher than the vote share they had in the last election. So not only the PCs, well into their second terms, are not getting eroded by time, the wear and tear of being in government. They're getting stronger. And I don't know if you updated your Ontario projection lately. I was busy this week, I didn't see, but I still have the PCs close or above the 90 seat mark. And so this, if it materializes, that means that the PCs would win 3 straight majorities with increasing caucus size every time. We haven't seen that in a century. So kudos to them for what they do, I guess. They seem to be cruising. When do you think March? Is that what we're looking at for Ontario? Perhaps March, just before the federal? Or
I assume you can't call it in January. That seems... I guess you can. Anything can happen. But if an election has to take 5 or 6 weeks, then it does seem like a March date would make the most sense. I guess we'll see. It is going to put it ahead of the federal campaign, almost certainly, especially when you look at the kind of timelines that the Liberals are working with that GST cut, with the checks they want to go out in the new year. So it does look like they're expecting that it'll either go down on the budget or they'll go all the way down to October. For Doug Ford, you mentioned the fact that they would have 3 elections in a row where they would increase their share of the seats. What's most remarkable about it is that this is not a very popular premier, right? This isn't a premier with 40-50% approval ratings. It's a premier in the 30s. It is a bit of a testament to the weakness, I suppose, of both the Liberals and the New Democrats right now.
Oh, absolutely. Considering that, whatever you think of Miss Crombie, she was, qualified. She's been in politics for a while, but the numbers really haven't moved that much, since she became leader. There was no leader bump. And same thing for Miss Stiles. I know Miss Stiles won the leadership by acclamation, right? There was no race. And I think that may have hurt for visibility, but she's had when did she become leader? It was in the fall of last year, right? Mm-hmm. So over a year, and no change whatsoever. They don't seem to connect. And so Doug Ford and his folksy charm, even though he's not incredibly well liked, he's liked enough, and the PCs benefit again from a big vote split in Ontario. So it's going to be a funny map when we look at those results, because the results that we had, Main Street Research, the details are paywalled, so we won't get into them. But the PCs are doing well in every region, even in Toronto. And so we're gonna have fun projecting that map, because there's going to be some surprises, I think. So.
I'm not sure if surprises and unpredictability is fun for us. It's a bit stressful, but I guess we'll see. And that'll be a little bit of an appetizer for the federal campaign. And when you look at the provincial numbers, there's a lot of similarities between them and the federal numbers in Ontario, though the Poilievre Conservatives would be, I'd say, a few points higher than the Ontario PCs. In Ontario. So it is a bit interesting. We'll see how those maps are going to align, if they will overlap at all. But Nothing in these numbers that is going to put Doug Ford on pause for his early election plans, assuming that those are the plans, and it seems quite likely.
Oh, yeah.
Shall we move to Quebec?
Well, that was fun.
I know you would like to.
That was busier than I thought this week, but it was it was the last week of sitting at the National Assembly, unless they changed their schedule at the last minute. So we had 2 polls in Quebec. The voting intentions were not that big of a surprise. I think the questions outside of voting intentions were also quite interesting. One was from a Palace data poll that was commissioned by yours truly, and L'Actualité magazine. And the other, of course, Léger by the Québécois Media family of media. And so the numbers are a bit different from one to. Let's go through them. So Palace data sees the Parti québécois at 35%. That's the highest from Palace. It also matches the number that Léger measured in early November. 35% for the Parti québécois. The CAQ at 20%. Dangerously close to the Liberals, which are at 18%. And then we have the Conservative at 13%, Québec solidaire at 12%. This is not a surprise. Now, Léger fielded just a few days after Palace. Léger sees a slight tightening of voting intentions, 31 for the Parti québécois, 24 for the CAQ, that has a little bounce back, 16 for the Liberal, 13 apiece for the Conservatives, and Québec solidaire. We're going to get into these numbers and the other questions, but Eric, your comments, your impressions from these set of numbers.
They are pretty consistent. There is some difference between the two of them, as you say. A 4-point difference for the PQ and the CAQ across these 2 polls. But in general, they're the same as what we've been seeing now throughout the year. So I'm not too surprised that we're getting, an up and a down between the two. If you told me that the PQ was at 33 and the CQ was at 22, I would be perfectly fine with that in terms of what the race looks like, right? Yeah. The fact that there's those differences, I'm not too upset about or too put out by. But the fact that the PQ is holding that support that it's had for the year, that it is well over 40% among the Francophone population in Quebec, which suggests that they would get a very big majority government out of these numbers, even though they're only at, as these numbers show, 1 in 3 of support among voters. Steady as she goes, I guess, in the province. The Liberals are going to have the new leader in the new year, in June. Still no real sign that the shine is coming off of Paul St. Pierre Plamondon. No. And the discussion of sovereignty doesn't seem to have boosted the PQ. No. It hasn't boosted sovereignty numbers, but this is enough to win. And once you're in, then you see what happens.
So that Palace poll that I just mentioned had the highest number for the Parti québécois, and interestingly, in the same poll, the same respondents, sovereignty went down. It was at 40, it went down to 37. Now, 3 points is the margin of error, so at the edge of the margin of error. So there's no, numbers-wise, there's no correlation between PQ support and support for sovereignty. It's been very flat for the past year and a half, 2 years. But yeah, so for me, the differences, I've been asked many times, why are the poll different? We hear that all the time, Eric, and you and I. They're not that different. I mean, one is a 15-point lead, the other is 7-point lead. So yeah, it's different. It's also very different on the seat-wise, on the seat count. Because, of course, when Léger published its poll, my piece for L'Actualité had already gone out, and it was being published 10 hours later, so I didn't change it. But the seat projection had the PQ comfortably in majority territory, 75 seats. You had to look all the way down the chart to see the CAQ at 5 seats on average. And the confidence intervals went from 15 to the optimistic scenario to 0. When you lose half and literally half of your support between elections, your seat count is just going to be crushed, especially if all those points have been absorbed by one party and not spread out through. I mean, it's not like the Conservatives are up 5 points, the Liberals are up 5 points, Québec solidaire up 2 points. No, all these points went to the Parti québécois. And of course, the PQ entirely has the right to rejoice from this. They have to be very happy. But they also have to shift how they will campaign. the Parti Québécois, for most of its history, has been a center-left, social democratic party. But I'm not sure how big of a tent they can have this time around, because these are CAQ voters. These are people that are disappointed with the CAQ, having deficits and not, pushing enough on the identity and language and culture and all these things. Parti Québécois will have many debates on their hands, because especially if sovereignty doesn't go up. This version of the Parti Québécois, with Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, they are fully aligned with having a referendum perhaps in year 1 or year 2 of their majority mandate. But the numbers aren't there for them to win. So what will they do? This is a discussion we'll have down the road, but I'm fascinated by this. So, Legault, Legault. Eric, I wanted to talk about the numbers of Legault. In the Palace poll.
He was drafted high in our special episode of a potential
second round
leader. And clearly, whoever drafted him had some good ideas.
Genius.
They knew what was going on.
Absolute genius.
So, yes, what are those numbers we got?
But he did. I mean, he was out one thing at a time. Okay, so the numbers. Should Legault seek a third term? That's a pretty simple question. 53% say no. He should resign as leader of the CQ and premier before the next election. And we still have time before that. 33% say no, he should stay on. So just at first look, you say, okay, 33% of Quebecers want Legault to stay on. That's pretty good number. But when you dive into the details, you see that a lot of PQ supporters and Liberal supporters want Legault to stay on, which I thought was very funny. It's very similar to those the federal conservatives who say, no, Trudeau should stay on. No, he should really go into the election because they feel he's vulnerable. So same thing, I think, for Legault. But to go back to your draft pick right there, Legault was asked by the journalist of the gallery, are you going to be there in 2026? And he said, I guarantee it. Now, we're not sure when the guarantee runs out. Is it an extended warranty? We're not sure. But he said, I guarantee I will be there in 2026. So Legault, perhaps he heard you draft him second place, and he said no.
He probably did, yeah.
He probably did, yeah. So,
yeah.
And also, satisfaction number for Legault. Are you not the CEQ government, but François Legault himself? 63% dissatisfied, 20% satisfied. This is a minus 43. This is worse than what we see on average for Justin Trudeau in the rest of Canada, and that's already bad. So these numbers, indicate that, okay, so the CEQ is unpopular, the leader is very unpopular. Most Quebecers want Legault to not seek a third mandate, and they're still trading the Parti Québécois, which has only 4 MNAs, soon 5 with Terrebonne. Very bad place for the CQ. I don't see how they turn this around, but I've been surprised before.
Maybe someone else will have an opportunity to do it. You did include in that poll on Palace about potential replacements for François Legault.
That's
the
right.
Top respondent, or the top response was, one of the top responses was none of the above, or that kind of thing, which isn't unusual with these kinds of polls. But Geneviève Guilbeault was the top one. She's the, the deputy premier.
Yeah.
I don't think any well-known outside of Quebec. I wouldn't say any of the ministers in the government would be well-known outside of Quebec.
No.
If there is, we're just talking here,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If Legault does decide to resign and there's a leadership race, I would be very curious to see what would happen if that happened before the federal election. If anybody at the federal level might decide that they want to take that on, that potential, and maybe someone who has a little bit more of a name recognition in Ottawa,
which party?
At least.
From which party?
Well,
that's the thing.
It's a coalition. Philip. It could be anybody.
But you don't see like a Trudeau Liberal heading. You know what? I want to lead the CEQ. It's really?
I don't know.
Conservatives, they're heading
could
for
be
victory.
conservative.
Can you imagine a Bloc MP saying, "I'm going to lead the CEQ"? What kind of? The reaction.
It's a coalition, my friend. It's right there in the name. There would be Éric Deltel, who was the last leader of the ADQ.
Gérard Deltel, yeah.
But anyway, we'll see. It could happen in 26. I said it was going to happen in 25 in the draft, so clearly Legault is going to resign in the next 12 months. But we'll see how that all works out and how the timing works out with the federal federal campaign when that's going to come around. I'm always interested in that, when people try to make the jump from one level to another, especially around elections, because that's when people have to make that decision. So could be interesting.
But it's also, it happens usually when there's a provincial cousin, right? The CQ has no obvious partner in Ottawa. So that's why, I mean, conservative MPs in Quebec, they're not gonna leave now. They're heading for victory. Pierre Poilievre will have to name some people in his cabinet from Quebec. So they have pretty good odds. I mean, if there's like 14 of them, how many cabinet ministers from Quebec? Maybe 5? So a third of them would be in cabinet, you would think, right? It's a good point. It's just, it would be very funny and interesting if it happened. But the CQ has never had a leadership race. So I don't think we have any idea how that's going to work out. But anyway, and you say Legault in 2025, maybe he's going to announce his resignation on December 3rd, and your pick will be nil. Your pick will be void.
If he was listening to the episode, then clearly that's what he's going to do, just to
spite you.
Okay, so we do not have a quiz this week. We are just going to skip right ahead to the number of the week. I'm going to go first because mine is maybe a bit more of a talker, because it goes a bit back to where we started this conversation about the GST break that the Liberals are bringing in starting on December 14th, and why we haven't seen any initial movement in the polls, and the only movement we've seen has been down. So 70% is my number of the week. This was in the Leger poll. This is the number of Canadians, percentage of Canadians who think, quote, these two measures of GST holiday and the $250 check are only electoral measures to get people's vote. 70% of Canadians just see this as a cynical political ploy. I think that explains a lot of the fact that we haven't seen much of a positive reaction in the polls. It was near unanimous, that view, among Conservative and Bloc voters. So it doesn't seem like this is going to get them off the fence.
Yeah.
But also 61% of New Democratic voters and 41% of Liberal voters, people who are currently saying they're going to vote Liberal, think that this is just an electoral gambit to try to gain support. This is the real danger that the Liberals have right now, is that everything that they do, and it's been like that for pretty much the last 18 months, is seen in the lens of desperation, trying to win the election. So I don't even think, if people like this idea, and the polling is pretty mixed on whether actually people like this idea. They would have preferred, for example, carbon tax reduction rather than this. You can't get people to come off the fence when people see right through it, or at least they think they see right through it.
Yeah.
And I think this is the biggest problem, and why I don't think we're going to see a bump for the Liberals out of this move.
I agree. And before my number of the week, if I can respond to that, I mean, if you polled Ontario voters about the Ford checks that you're going to get, I'm pretty sure the results will be similar. Getting checks from the government doesn't change people's mind. People take it, put it in their account, and that's it. Legault did it, didn't get any bump. He was already in position of strength. Legault, Ford, same thing. Yeah, people, when they're cynical, they at some point, I understand why they're cynical. And such a strange measure, having 5% off your Christmas shopping, it's just, the optics are so bad. Okay.
Before we move on, the poll does suggest people are happy to get it, in the sense that they're going to take it.
Yeah.
And there was a poll, I think, that said that they would like it to be more or something like that, or they would like it to go to more people. But yeah, like you said, you don't get the credit for it. People are like, fine, I'll take the 5% off, thanks. But you're not getting my vote because of that, especially since you're doing it to try to get my vote. I almost think, in a way, people have a defensive reaction to it. They don't want to reward those kinds of ploys. So anyway, yeah, I think it's like a lot of the measures they've tried to do to try to turn things around over the last year. Don't think it's going to work.
Maybe a cabinet shuffle will do it. Okay,
that's a great idea.
My number of the week, I'm going outside the board here. My number of the week is 689. This would be the amount of votes in the last Quebec election that Parti 51, Party 51, received in the election. That's 0.02%. This is a party that is promoting the annexation of Quebec to the United States. And so, of course, there's been talk this week about the joke that was made at the Trump-Trudeau table about, maybe Canada should just become the 51st state, not realizing that it would be mostly Democratic. But I choose this number because it is a marginal idea in Canada, in Quebec, and elsewhere. Okay. And also, please, I know, dear journalists and people in the media, I'm really on your side. I'm not anti-media. I roll my eyes at many media, but that's normal in a free media society. But you don't have to overreact to every little thing that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. Okay? Most of it is not serious. We've been through this from 2016 to 2020, where he says many things. He works by threats. And not everything he says should be taken at face value. So please do not overreact to this stuff, because I was surprised. I was taken aback by how much ink was spilled, if we can say that, by the notion that, maybe the US will want to annex Canada. No, they won't. No, it's not a story, please. It was funny, but come on. So yeah, that was not my number of the week.
I mean, the United States could become the 11th province. Maybe we should get that going. Get that rumor started. They can have 4 seats in the Senate.
Hey, some of them will hear, you guys are a monarchy? I like that. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Or constitutional monarchy.
Sure,
right.
Sure.
And
There's still monarchy.
The king is Canadian. He's not British. Just happens to also be British. Anyway, another topic for another day. All right, so that'll be it for this week's episode of The Numbers. We got tons of questions in our mailbag, which we're about to record. Lots of really good questions. We have actually a few on this thing that we're not supposed to react too much about, the 51st state. But lots of great questions. So if you want to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca, join the Patreon, and get access to that every week in our special episode that we record every month, and join the Discord, which, hey, even when we're not posting, it is hopping. People are posting left and right. We sign in, there's 200, 400 new messages. Can't keep up. But anyway, it's been a busy week, and it's going to continue to be busy, I think, until we get to Christmas, and then it'll take a bit of a break. But until next week, Philippe, looking forward to chatting.
Always a pleasure, Eric. Merci beaucoup tout le monde, and have a great week.